Welcome to CHILIpulse. This is a space that we created to get some actionable insights from all things related to Chili Publish. Today's episode is going to be about API first as a concept. I'm your host Bram, and with me I have Brian.
Hi.
Welcome, Brian.
Thank you.
You are chapter lead JavaScript.
Correct, that's true.
Before we go into the API first, can you maybe explain a little bit what is a chapter lead JavaScript?
Sure. So chapter lead JavaScript is actually a person who facilitates the JavaScript team into being the best possible developers that they can be. That said, I don't have a lot to do because of that. We have very good developers in the JavaScript team. And next to that, I still am quite technical and hands-on on code stuff as well. So it's a bit of both worlds, I would say. It's very cool.
So you're still helping out in development, but mainly coaching the team?
Yeah, indeed.
Where necessary.
Playing as a facilitator towards the team, having meetings with other stakeholders, with other chapter leads as well to align all teams. Very interesting role.
Super. Well, today's topic is API first. I've been here with the company for a while because I'm one of the founders, so I've been here since day one. And since day one, we had the concept it needs to be developer friendly. How does that translate? Because you joined a bit later, can you maybe elaborate a bit more to the listeners, to the viewers, what is for you the definition of what is the concept of API first? Yeah,
so API first, it's actually in our new way of working, it's actually even API first and SDK first. So what does it mean? It means that we put a lot of thought into how we are going to define and design our APIs. We actually involve all stakeholders, maybe more on that later. We involve all stakeholders to make the API really the backbone of our application. So therefore, we actually need a lot of goals. One of them is that the API, of course, needs to be well designed. It should be easily consumable by us, but also by our partners or people who are integrating our applications. It needs to be, of course, very scalable since we're a SaaS company. We need to focus on a very clean architecture.
Maybe before you go into details, API first, I know. SDK, I don't have experience with SDK. Can you make me quickly explain the difference between the two?
Yeah, sure. So the API is actually something that runs server side, that is hosted on a server, while the SDK is something that you actually host on your own machine. So when we are talking about the SDK, it's a piece of client-side technology that will allow a developer to communicate with another part of the application, which is also client-side. In our case, this actually, for example, means that we will connect the engine with the front-end built around the engine.
Yeah. Okay. Super. And when you think about API first, I can imagine there's some, like you said, design thoughts on how to do that. So what is a good place to start when you start designing an API first application?
Well, first of all, of course, you need to align all stakeholders. In our case, this is mainly going to be a discussion between front-end and back-end, but actually also our product team is involved in having correct calls and that our controllers are in the right place, because they are also in charge, or not per se in charge, but they are also helping out on documentation, for example. So if we can have everyone aligned on these things, afterthought, because it's not really an afterthought how we implement it, but like an afterthought, like documentation is not an afterthought anymore. It's something that you can do from the start together with all stakeholders aligned, which makes it a way smoother process. And also, I'm very sure that this will translate towards our customers as well in the long term.
It reminds me of the concept of our VP delivery. The shift left is indeed a mindset to do things more in the beginning instead of having it as an afterthought. So that the same thing goes for designing an API first application.
Yeah, indeed.
What will we need in the end to have it already in place before we start developing as a concept? Yeah. I guess we talked about in a few other episodes about automation, lights out, headless. I guess, if you want to do that, you will need an API. That's
definitely true.
Yeah.
So apart from building an out-of-the-box solution for our customers, we actually also have our API available, or APIs, I would say. And indeed, to be able to do something headless, you need an API that you can trust on.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you want to run a batch of renders overnight, in our case, then you need to speak with that API without a front-end interaction or without the user clicking the button to, hey, I want to do here 1,000 times this, no, you want to automate this. And then an API is indeed like the backbone of that application.
So it's basically, in other episodes, we talked about linking a database, a data set of inputs to a smart template, and then the API or the custom codes would then instruct the API to do certain stuff overnight or behind the scenes or whatever. Indeed. Headless. All right. When you say the API SDK, what are like the design patterns? What are the thought processes when you want to go into the details of an API design? What is important there?
Yeah, so first of all, like we already said, we define what is going to be included in a certain scope of calls. Especially when I talk about the SDK, we define everything inside of controllers. There is like a principle called the model view controller aspect, where the model is the data or the types that the SDK will return, and the controllers are actually the things that will do some stuff with the data they retrieve, and then our view is then the front end in this case that is actually taking this data and this stuff that happened in the background to do something with it. Apart from that, we also have our APIs, where our very capable backend team is mainly working on, where we like we already said, we sit together and the principle is a bit the same. So we define like, okay, we have the scope of, for example, media. We have the scope of media, so we will put everything inside of the media controller, and then we can move forward with other calls inside of that. So that actually allows you to have a very clear structure to the end user as well, or the developer that is consuming your API.
You say API and APIs a few sentences ago. That means we have more than one API?
Yeah.
And that links then back to the scope of what you want to do with a certain API.
Yeah, indeed. So we have an API that is built not for, but in assisting our graphics platform, especially regarding subscriptions, environments, all these details about your stuff. And then we have our environment API, which is actually to get your data, get your media, get your fonts or your templates, for example, to create new templates. All these things, the more CRUD operations towards the things that you actually want to output, for example. So indeed, we have multiple APIs that are open.
But that is indeed also explained in documentation, where we say for these topics you need to be in connection with that API.
Yeah.
If you want to work on a template, it's more in the environment API. If it's user subscription, like you say, it's subscription. And SDK, indeed, that's the local part of the software where you communicate with the local software. That
is really to build an integration on top of our existing engine.
Yeah. I've seen you do it. The SDK, that's something that is also you can do in a browser. Mm-hmm. That is, in my experience, and it explains that, how do you say, it shows my age probably that I didn't do that. But talking about APIs is one thing, but let's make it very tangible. API, SDK, I've seen you and colleagues communicate with the application in the browser console. It interests me to see how do you do it? What is the concept behind that? How do you? Yep. Can you maybe show a few quick things?
Yeah, definitely. So this is, for example, our studio application. What you see now is the light gray area that is actually our engine, and then the more darker gray area is the front end that especially my team has built on top of it. So if you do an action here, you see things are reacting, but how is that possible? Because you actually have two applications running in the same window. Well, that is possible because of the SDK. So if I would take you to an example, let me quickly show something. We actually expose our SDK even on towards the end user. Not going to say that we are going to do this forever, but it might be interesting to know for now. So window.sdk. Let's say, for example, document.getCurrentDocumentState. This is an important call. So what are we going to do now? We're actually going to say to the SDK, hey, could you give me the latest state of the document? So I changed something around. I put the bottle a bit more on the right. So now, it's async, very important. Always forgetting that. So when you do the async call, you actually see that you get the data back, and you get our document back in its latest state. So that is something that the SDK can do, for example, that is allow you client side to interact with the engine.
And the way you communicate back, is that JSON?
Yeah.
You see there?
This is JSON, but it's stringified JSON. So actually we have everything in JSON available, but we need to parse it in the front end because it actually gets back as a string. But as you see, it's also already parsed here in parse data. It's already parsed in the JavaScript model.
So that makes it also, for somebody who's doing integration, makes it very easy to debug, to find certain properties and seeing how to manipulate certain topics to achieve their goal.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the big perks of this as well is that we can just give this JSON to our API then on the environment level, our environment API. We can just give this JSON to say, hey, can you output this for me? And it will just work.
Yeah, super. That's the SDK.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say I want to do an API and talk to the server side calls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where do I find, how do I find which calls are available? What is...
Yeah. There is a very cool tool called Swagger that we started implementing for it. So this is now an example of the environment API. I'm not authenticated right now. I should fetch a token and put it into authorization mode. But I'm not going to do that. I just want to show you how neat it is. So, for example, here for media,
these are calls that are then categorized even within one API.
Yeah, indeed. As you see, we have fonts, media, templates, which are the studio templates.
Yeah.
We have output calls to generate output, and some health and info checks. So to just see, is the API available, we can ping it that it's available, and then some info that we see which version is actually running on this API. So let me take media, for example. So here you see we have already quite a lot of get calls. The first one being a call to return all media in the environment, including subfolders. So this will actually be handing you all media in a flat list, including all subfolders. We have the media directory, for example, which will actually return all media and directories in the environment located directly in the requested folder, not including subfolders. So that means we will here actually get a more structured way of displaying the media. So we will have the concept of folders and so on, which is way more easy, of course, to navigate through.
So if I want to design an application based on our application, based on our SDK, this would be the place to look for what calls are available.
Yeah, indeed.
What do I need to provide? What do I get back?
Yeah, indeed. So not only what calls are available, but also what do I need to give? These things are required. For example, the environment name is required, so you need to give that. You know it already because it says it's required. You see all possible query parameters as well here. But way more important, actually, you can also see what is coming back from it. So in our case, we are very TypeScript fanatics, I would say. We actually want to be completely sure what is coming back from our API. So we type in advance our returns from our API, because we already know by just looking at this what is coming back from
Yeah.
our API. And what is very cool about Swagger is, I already said I'm not authenticated, but if I was authenticated, I can just say, try it out. I can put in some parameters, and I can actually execute that call and get the actual result back.
So you could try before you buy.
Yeah, indeed, it's very cool, and
Yeah.
especially Swagger is a very, very powerful tool for a developer to start playing around with an API without actually starting to code, and just checking if a certain company delivers their value, like what they say. Oh, we have a very good API. Swagger is a very good tool to assess that, or to check if that's actually true.
Yeah. Super. Does it also make it easier when we develop API first? Does it? How does it relate to testing the software? Does it make life easier, more difficult?
It definitely makes life easier. So as I said, this enables us to be 100% sure of what types are coming back from our API, which is actually already some sort of testing as is. But also you can debug everything. If you see that something is going wrong, you will get a way shorter feedback loop. And also, worth mentioning, as probably right now the biggest consumer of these new APIs, or our team is at least. We definitely see a lot of value in this Swagger. So it speeds up our development process as well, to just be able to play around with it, to check the types, to do everything.
Imagine you are a developer at an agency, because that's the other side of the table, or these are our customers. How would this approach speed up your work, or how would it impact your work? Let's say you're being tasked of making a brand portal. How would that impact you as a developer?
Yeah. So first of all, you have our written documentation, or documentation pages, maybe worth mentioning. Those are already structured in everything that we have, but these are all graphics focused. But if we go to Studio, for example, you also see our release notes. You see an SDK reference. So this is already some part of the documentation regarding the SDK. How would this speed up my development process? Well, if something is well documented, it will be way faster to navigate around it and to search the things that you actually need. Maybe fun to actually think about as well, is if something is well documented, ChatGPT might in the future be able to index it a bit better.
True. If ChatGPT indexes our documentation, then we can maybe speak to it and say, make a front end for CHILI GraFx.
That's maybe that is the future. Who knows? But we're not there yet. So I think making the life of developers easier right now is
indeed.
The best focus a company can give.
Well, we do that for both developers and for designers, making their life easier to automate stuff in creative automation. Well, thank you so much for shining a bit of light on the API first approach of how we develop software.
With pleasure.
Thank you for joining us, and also thank you for joining us and listening in, and hope to see you in the next episode. If you liked this episode and you want to get engaged, or you have tips for improvements or changes, please let us know at pulse@chilipublish.com. Also, if you want to be informed of next episodes, please subscribe to the newsletter on the form below.